With
Yes.
due permission, thank you, Dr. Suyog. So, good evening, everyone. This is Gaurav from Goa, and a warm welcome to this evening's webinar from Hype to Evidence Interpreting AI and Machine Learning Papers in Psychiatry, brought to you by the Research Subcommittee of the Psychiatry Society of Western Zonal Branch. It is my privilege to welcome Dr. K.K. Mishra, our President of the Western Zonal Branch, and Dr. Abhijit Fayab is, I believe, is not here, but still, along with our
Yes, I'm
distinguished
here. I'm
colleagues
here, Gaurav.
and friends who have joined us this evening for what promises to be a very thoughtful and much needed conversation. So, before I move on to introduce our eminent chairperson for the session, I would like to inform the participants that they can type in their queries or questions for our speakers of the session in the chat box. Hi, Dr. Abhishek. Hi.
Hi.
So the participants over here and also who will be joining can type in their questions in the chat box during the session, and we shall try to accommodate a maximum number of questions at the end of the session. So to chair today's session, we have with us Dr. Vishwajit Singh, Assistant Professor of Biostatistics at AIMS Nagpur, with a PhD in Biostatistics from AIMS New Delhi and prior experience at Texas Tech University Sciences Center. With over 100 peer-reviewed publications, including JAMA and the Journal of Clinical Oncology, and research interests spanning survival analysis, competing risk modeling, and evidence-based research, he brings exactly the rigor today's topic demands. Please join us in welcoming Dr. Vishwajit Singh to chair this section. Dr. Singh, it's over to you to forward and introduce our speaker.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Gaurav, for your kind introduction. Respected, I'm sorry, my internet is I think little slow. I'm traveling, so I'm putting my video off. Okay. So, respected President of the Psychiatry Society of Western Zone, Honorable Secretary, our esteemed speaker, faculty members, esteemed delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It is my privilege to serve as the chairperson for today's academic session. Today's topic is really very interesting. From hype to evidence, interpreting AI ML papers in psychiatry. It is both timely as well as highly relevant also. We all know that artificial intelligence and machine learning are transforming healthcare research and clinical practice, particularly in psychiatry. I am focusing particularly psychiatry because see, whatever the data generated from the psychiatry is completely different from the all other healthcare streams. Because uh, when I was in USA, we are struggling to model the scores because the scores is not basically a continuous data; it is highly skewed majority of the time, and it is and bounded also. So we have a lower and upper limit. In such type of data, it is very difficult to directly use any of the like linear regression. We try to transform the data to the percentage and then try to use the beta regression. But these all regression models are not as much appropriate. That's why I'm saying the data generated from the psychiatry is completely different from the data generated from the other source. And nowadays, while AI-based studies are increasing rapidly, it is equally important that clinicians and researchers understand how to critically evaluate AI-based evidence and differentiate the genuine scientific evidence from the hype all. Because AI is nowadays the topic itself covered. Is it too much hype, or really we have something gaining from that? From that AI model, okay, and interpreted their findings appropriately clinical phase. So with all this, we have our with the importance of this uh, demand, we have the privilege of having Dr. Abhijit Pakare, sir. He is a professor in the Department of Community and Family Medicine at AIMS Bhopal. Dr. Pakare is a distinguished academician and researcher with extensive experience in epidemiology, research methodology, and evidence-based medicine. I am confident that this lecture will help us better understanding not only the strengths, limitations also, and particularly interpreting the AI and ML research in psychiatry. So with the great pleasure, I invite Dr. Abhijit Pathare, sir, to deliver today's lecture. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, without wasting time, we will start the presentation. Good evening, everyone, and thank you to the Research Subcommittee of Psychiatric Society of West Zone for having me. Our topic tonight is From Hype to Evidence Interpreting AI and Machine Learning Papers in Psychiatry. Over the next 45 minutes or so, my goal is simple to give you a practical, repeatable way to read the flood of AI papers now landing in our journals and to tell the genuinely useful ones apart from merely impressive. You won't need any coding or mathematics. I will build the whole talk around real famous studies and we will keep it about 45 minutes at the end of your questions. Let's begin. Let me start with a real study. In 2015, a team showed that from just few minutes of young person's speech, an algorithm could predict who would go on to develop psychosis. And it got every single case right, 100% accuracy. The headlines were AI predicts psychosis from how you talk. Now hold that number in your mind because here it is the first intuitive lesson of the evening. In medicine, a perfect score should make us more suspicious, not less. And before we even get there, notice something about the rare outcomes. Suicide is rare. So if someone says that my model is no one attempts a suicide, still he is correct 99% of the time and the model is 99% accurate, but it is useless. So with rare outcomes, big numbers lie. Keep both of those things, those thoughts with you. We have seen such kind of headlines actually. The one says AI can tell whether you are depressed from Instagram's photos or not. It was done on a small study and basically they looked at the color filters and not the illness. Then we have seen news like Facebook rolls out AI to detect suicide posts. It was deployed on billions of the people, but it is not published, neither validated at all. That was just news. Then we also have seen news like AI predicts suicide from Facebook language with AUC of around zero point 0.7. But we know from decades of research that predicting suicide from language alone is barely better than chance. And then there are news like chatbot supports people with eating disorder. So we will come back to all of this in moment. The pattern is always the same. They will project a striking number or a slick demo, and that will be amplified into headline long before there is any real evidence. So hype is always there in most of the AI related news. But this hype is not harmless. So there are cases where a mental health support model or mental health care support platform, which was supposed to be operated by humans, was quietly shifted to GPT-3 model, and AI was responding, not humans were responding. Then there is a litigation related to chatbot encouraging 14-year-olds suicide. Then there are even we have seen we also have seen while chatting with the chatbots how it validates your views. So it can validate the delusional statements and miss the risk when it shows up indirectly, like humans can catch up subtle comments about food or hopelessness, but this AI may or may not pick it up. So when we deploy an unvalidated tool to the distressed people, the failure modes are clinical. And that is why I want to argue tonight that a careful reading of these papers is not only the academic skill, it is rather a patient safety skill. And we all should learn it. We will do this talk with the help of a few case studies and then we will talk about 1 7 question skill. So first we will learn to classify AI paper we are looking at, and then I will tell the four different case studies and particularly critiquing them, and then there is one useful case study that will be told. And you don't need to code, just listen to the talk. Every study it will ask the three questions: what did they do, what did they find, and what does it teach me about the next paper on my desk. And if you remember nothing else tonight, please remember this one idea. Artificial intelligence has given us great deal of new vocabulary like deep learning, neural networks, area under curve, training set, but it has not given us new rules for evidence. Rule to appraise evidence remains the same. A biased sample is still a biased sample. Testing a model on the data you built is still cheating. A risk score that is not calibrated is still misleading. So please don't be dazzled by the jargon. The question you already asked for any prognostic model or any diagnostic test or any clinical trial, those are the exactly questions that expose a weak AI paper. Critical appraisal is the same, whether the tool is AI or not AI. So let us start with the very first move. Before you can judge a paper, you have to classify it. What kind of AI paper is this? There are four kinds of studies you will see. First ones are prognostic or risk prediction models. It includes relapse of psychosis, attempts of suicide, or transition into the next phase of illness or severity. Second are diagnostic or classification models. Does this person have a condition now? These are often from imaging or speech. Third ones are of different in kind, like intervention studies where AI itself is the treatment, a chatbot or a triage tool, and it must be judged like any therapeutics. And fourth are early real world deployments where safety and workflow matter the most. Here is the key point. Most psychiatry AI papers you will read are prediction or classification models and not trials. And that single fact tells you which traps to go hunting for. Why does the type matter so much? Because a prediction paper at its very best can only show that model ranks risk in some dataset. It cannot show that acting on that score actually helps the patient. That is completely a different causal claim and that needs a trial and not the ROC curve. The commonest overclaim in this entire field is presenting a prediction model as if it were a proof of clinical benefit. So here is a habit worth building. Read the last sentence of the abstract. See what is the take home claim and then look at the methods and ask whether this design was made to support such claim. For example, a retrospective records model was built on retrospective records and that reports area under curve of zero point 0.8 for suicide. And then conclusion is written as this model could reduce suicide. But it has never intervened on anyone. It has not done any comparative trial and it cannot show the benefit. So contrast this with another example which we will see later in the presentation. Before proceeding further, let me give you a 5-minute primer. This will explain the key concepts you will read for reading the machine learning papers, and it will give you the necessary vocabulary, and you will be comfortable in reading method section. I will explain you the common algorithms and two matrices which are used everywhere. So, what are all these models? So logistic regression is one you already know. It weighs the predictors and gives you a probability. It is transparent and it is the honest yardstick that every fancier model should have to beat. A decision tree is simply a clinical flowchart of yes and no splits. It is readable on its own, but it overfits. Random forest is nothing but hundreds of such trees generated randomly voting together, and it is basically wisdom of crowds. It is more stable but harder to see inside. Gradient boosting and its famous version XGBoost builds trees in sequence, each one correcting the last mistake, and it's often the best performer or ordinary on ordinary tabular data, and also the easiest to overfit. A support vector machine finds the boundary with the widest margin between the groups, and a neural network, or famously known as deep learning, learn their own feature from the raw images, speech, or text. It is very powerful, but data hungry and opaque. It is said that it is kind of black box, and it is easiest to overfit among our small sample data sets. And here is the liberating part. For appraisal or for critical review, the algorithm name rarely matters. You have to look at the intuition. So on the clinical tabular data, they perform about the same and seldom beat a good logistic regression model by much. So don't be impressed by the deep learning on its own. Now the metric which everyone quotes, AUC, that is area under curve. What does AUC of 0.85 or 0.85 means? So let us pick one patient who truly has the disease and one patient who truly doesn't have the disease at random. What does AUC tell? AUC is simply the probability that model gives the true case the higher score. So 0.85 means that 85% of in 85% of such pairs ranking is correct. And if AUC is zero point 0.5, it is just as good as tossing the coin. And if it is near 1, it is perfect separation. So the curve behind it, the ROC curve, just what does it do? Just it plots the threshold uh, and plots sensitivity on y-axis against the 1 minus specificity or false positivity rate. And AUC is basically area under that curve, that is probability of ranking higher for the given outcome. So its great virtue is that it's single, it's threshold free summary of ranking, and it lets you compare different models at a glance, which is why it is famous. But keep watching because the very next slide is about what AUC hides. So why is high AUC not enough? There are three things which it hides. Number one, it says nothing about calibration. It grades ranking, not whether the actual probabilities are right. Number two, it is optimistic on rare outcomes because it averages over the thresholds you would never actually see. And third, it is blind to the base rate or it is blind to the prevalence. So same AUC can describe genuinely useful tool or a false alarm machine, depending on how common the outcome is. The fix is simple. For the rare outcomes, we use something called as precision recall curve. It plots the precision, that's positive predictive value, against the recall, that is sensitivity. The two numbers clinician actually feel. And here is the crucial bit. On a precision recall curve, the chance is not the 0.5%. It is the base rate or prevalence itself. So at 1% base rate, a precision of 0.3 is actually 30 times better than the chance. This sounds low, but it is meaningful. And ROC AUC would hide that scale completely. So the rule of thumb for rare outcome, ask for calibration plot and AUC precision recall curve, not only the ROC AUC. Now we will discuss the case studies and the traps which we have to look for. Basically, these traps are overfitting, leakage, calibration, and misleading matrices. The first case study is about the speech AI by Bedi and colleagues conducted in 2015. Here is what they actually did. They took 34 young people at a clinical high risk for psychosis and followed them for up to 2.5 years, during which five of them transitioned to psychosis. They ran the transcripts of their interviews through automated language analysis, pulling out things a clinician senses but rarely measures. How well meaning flows from sentences to sentences, how complex the phrasing is, and so on. And a classifier using leave one out cross validation. It means leaving one person at a time validating against that. Separated the five future psychosis cases from the rest and with 100% accuracy, outperforming the clinical interviews. It's genuinely exciting work. Now hold that 100% and 5 out of 34 side by side. So isn't the perfect score a good news? The catch is the 100% rested on just 5 events in 34 people, graded on the very same tiny sample. With so few events and a flexible features, a model can essentially memorize the individuals rather than learn a real signal. That is called as overfitting, and it produces an over optimistic number. And here is the honest sequel. When the same approach was retested across the protocols in an independent group, accuracy came down to about 79%, and around 72% for telling recent onset psychosis from the healthy speech. Lower but real. Now, notice one more thing, and it's important. Even the honest sequel mostly reports accuracy, not sensitivity, not PPV, not calibration, not confidence interval. On the imbalanced sample, accuracy alone still flatters. A better number is only better if it's right number. So the concept to carry away is this. Within sample cross validation is not external validation. A model is only hypothesis until it holds up, until it reports the right matrices, and until it is tested in the new cohort. Now, coming to case study 2. In 2020, everyone knows there was COVID. So, under enormous pandemic pressure, thousands of team raced to detect COVID from chest imaging. Roberts and colleagues did something valuable. They systematically reviewed the whole field. Over 2,200 papers narrowed to the 415 for full reading, and then 62 that passed the quality screening. And their verdict is a gut punch. Of those 62 best in class models, not a single one was fit for clinical use. Now, one of the recurring culprits worth naming is Frankenstein's dataset. That is the dataset stitched together from several public sources. So the same patient can end up in both training and test set, and cases and controls can come from entirely different hospitals or scanners. The model that learns the seams, the site, the scanner, the age, not the disease, and that sets up our next concept. Before elaborating this concept, I will quickly tell you how the models are usually developed. What they do is they select a data set, and then they split that data set into a training data set and a testing data set. And basically, predictors are developed on a training data set. And once the model is developed, it is tested on the testing data set. So this is common among the machine learning algorithms. Uh, Now I will explain the concept of leakage. So what happens is this is the single most reasons a model look brilliant on paper and then collapses in the real world. Leakage is when information from the test data set, which was meant to validate the rule developed, or from the future information either from the test data set or from the future sneaks into the training data set. So the model is effectively graded on material it has already seen. The commonest form is on the left here. Doing your data preparation, scaling, feature selection, imputation on the whole data set before you split it. So the test set has already shaped the model. The fix on the right is simple. Split first, learn every rule on the training data set only, and then apply those fixed rules to test set. And then the three cousins in the box. The same patient on the both side. If repeated patients are being observed, and if someone samples data from that, and if some of their observations come in training and some come in testing, then that is a problem. It is like a Frankenstein problem, using the information that only exists after the outcome. Like if outcome has happened and there are certain events which are recorded in the database, and that those outcomes are those events are considered for developing model. So that is future event which has not happened, and it is used to predict the event. That is circular logic. And that's feature, that's really the label in the disguise. So when you read a method section, look at the words split, before, and the pipeline, and be suspicious if pre-processing is described before the split. So processing has to be done after the split, and testing dataset has to be untouched until the rule is developed. Now, let me make that concrete because leakage can feel abstract. What is feature scaling? Many algorithms need their inputs on a comparable range, so each predictor is rescaled. The commonest being standardization. Subtract the average, divide by the standard deviation, so every value becomes how many standard deviation from the mean. So different predictors become comparable. Now, here is the subtle trap. That average and standard deviation have to be computed from some data. If you compute them from the whole data set before splitting, then your test patients have helped set the very scale on which they are later judged. It's a small contamination, but it inflates the performance. And the same applies to imputing missing values or choosing predictors across everyone. The honest recipe is fit on train, transform on test, split first, learn the numbers from the training set alone, apply them to the untouched data set, and crucially, repeat that inside the cross validation fold. So, what does leakage actually look in a psychiatry study? A few very real examples. A speech and psychosis model with three recordings per person, split at the recording level. So, the same voice is in the train and test, and the model learns the person, not the illness. A suicide attempt model that uses one to one nursing observation as a predictor. So, someone is put on one to one nursing observation and it takes it as a predictor, and the observation was started precisely because the staff already judged the person is to be at high risk. Also, examples like predicting depression using antidepressant prescribed as a feature, that's just telling the model the answer. Or cases from one hospital and controls from another hospital, the model simply learns the site. So, two analogies that I find stick. Number one, student who studied the last year's paper and then sits that exact paper and scores 100%. That's within sample cross validation. Give them a different final and you find give them a different final paper and you will finally learn what they actually know. So another example could be, imagine testing a new antihypertensive only on very patients on whom readings were used to choose their dose. So obviously it will look perfect, but you tuned it to them. A fresh cohort is the only honest test. So that it means that not only internal validation, external validation is important. The case study 3 is not actually from the psychiatry field, it is from the ICU, but it is a larger real world example. So, epic sepsis model is a proprietary alert built in one of the most widely used electronic health records. So, what they did is they studied the records again and again every 15 minutes, and they used to generate a alert which patient is going to land up in the sepsis, and they claim that their area under curve is zero point 0.7 up to zero point 0.8, and it was deployed in larger American hospitals. Then an independent team validated it, and they found validated it in around 28,000 patients and 38,000 admissions, and AUC was actually 0.63. It missed two-third of the actual sepsis patient. It did give alert for those two-third patients, and yet it fired alert on roughly 18% of all admissions. So what has happened is there was no discrimination, there was poor calibration, and there was industry scale alert fatigue. The doctors were getting alert that this patient is going to land up in sepsis, and that didn't. So the gap between the brochure number and validated number is the whole story, and this sets up the most underappreciated idea in the field. So does high AUC means the numbers are right? No. And this is the distinction I most want you to leave with tonight. There are two separate questions hidden inside: is this model good? Discrimination on the left, it is a ranking question. Does the model score the future event patients higher than the rest? That's what AUC measure. But ranking tells you nothing about whether the number themselves are correct. Calibration on the right asks, when the model says 70% risk, do about 70% of the 70 of the 100 patient actually have the event? The red curve here ranks beautifully a good AUC, and yet it's systematically overconfident, saying 70 when the truth is 35. And this matters because in practice we act on the number, not on the ranking. Set a treatment threshold, and a miscalibrated model floods you with false positives, drives over treatment, and the first time alarms prove hollow. It destroys trust, which is exactly Epic Sepsis did. So make this your reflex. If a model outputs a probability that will guide a decision, demand the calibration plot. Its absence is itself a finding. Our fourth case study is about arithmetic and it ties the others together. Our most important outcomes are rare and rarity breaks the familiar matrices. Remember the opening. At 1% base rate, a model that flags no one is 99% accurate and useless. But watch what happens even to a genuinely good model. 90% sensitivity and 90% specificity at 1% base rate or 1% prevalence. So if we use this model for 10,000 people, it will correctly flag 90 of the 100 true cases because sensitivity is 90%. But it also falsely flags 10% of the 10% of the 9,900 patients because specificity is 90%. So 10% will be flagged as positive. So, and that 10% is 999 false alarms, 990 false alarms. So, of everyone it flags, only about 8% are real, roughly 11 false alarms for every true case. From a model most people would call excellent, 90% sensitivity and 90% specificity, people call it excellent. And that isn't hypothetical. An emergency department validation of epic sepsis alert found a positive predictive value of 7.6% only. So on rare outcomes, ask for sensitivity together with positive predictive value, and positive predictive value is dependent on prevalence or the base rate and the precision recall curve as well. And ask for counts out of 100 patients or out of 1000 real patients. So now to be fair, a rare outcomes prediction isn't hopeless. A pediatric suicide model on over 41,000 young people reached an AUC of 0.81 to 0.86. Genuinely promising work. It simply sits at the single site stage and still needs external validation before anyone gets onto it. So now we have seen the four case studies and what are the four different traps. And good news is that you don't have to invent the questions for critical appraisal yourself. The methodological community has built consensus standards and precisely the way to how to review the papers. Let me show you the four you should know by name. So these are different checklists. You don't need to memorize their names. Only remember that for prediction and diagnostic tools, something like tripod is used for intervention, protocol of the intervention, Spirit AI, and proper study consort AI is used. And for early stage deployment, there is some tool called as Decide AI. These tools are available on the Equator network and also on the website of the presentation. I have linked it. Now the traps we discussed, they apply to whole of the medicine, but psychiatry is peculiar and diagnosis of psychiatry many times are abstract and it is about labels themselves and it is the place where and therefore psychiatry is such a branch where your clinical expertise beats any statistics. So let us go ahead and go to one more case study. This is about how algorithms learn from biased model. So a study model was made to allocate extra care to Americans. So what they did is they looked at the database and they looked at the expenditure on future healthcare related expenditures, and they made it as a proxy. That is, if they need to spend X amount of money in the future, that represents their health need, and then they ran the algorithm. But what has happened, so they wanted to rank who was the sickest, but they used the proxy. But because the system historically spends less on black patients for the same illness, cost systematically understated their need. The result was at any given risk score, black patients were considerably sicker than the white patients, and simply fixing the label would have more than doubled the proportion of black patients flagged for extra help from about 18% to 47%. And what has happened? The algorithm was not wrong, the code was not racist, but it learned to optimize a biased target. And the labels in psychiatry are peculiar, and all of you are experts. I'm not going to explain why so. So the lesson generalizes. What is the label actually measuring? A model is only ever as valid as its label. And if that label encodes the health system's behavior, then the model learns the system, not the illness. Let me make it concrete for us. Imagine training a model to predict aggression using the label given PRN sedation. But the sedation reflects staffing levels, ward culture, and who looks threatening to staff, not aggression itself. So the model learns who gets sedated, and then we call it objective. And psychiatry is full of these proxy labels: admitted, referred to crisis, coerced, and add that to our other vulnerabilities. Depression, pulled from the billing code, is noisy and heterogeneous. Our diagnoses have no biomarker gold standard, and they shift with time and rater. Our samples are small, and with digital phenotyping data like speech and phone sensors, it is deeply intimate. So the unifying question is, and the one that only clinicians in the room can really raise, is this: is the model predicting the disorder or the health system behavior around it? Now, I have been criticizing AI models and machine learning models since last few minutes, but our goal is evidence and not only the criticism, not the cynicism. Goal is evidence. So let me end the case studies on a positive note. There was a example AI tool. There are many tools. There was an example AI tool which has evaluated the way we would actually want it to be. So we will talk about a chatbot which was tested like a treatment. So this is the Therabot trial published in NEGM AI in 2025. Instead of a retrospective model claiming it will help, this team did the hard thing. They ran a proper randomized controlled trial, 210 adults with clinically significant depression, anxiety, or elevated eating disorder risk. They compared 4 weeks of generative AI therapy chatbot against a waitlisted control with a symptom change specified in advances as a primary outcome. And they reported significant symptom reduction relative to control across all three groups with a good engagement and therapeutic alliance, which is notable for a fully automated tool. The point isn't that Therabot is proven for the clinic. If it's that the design, the randomization, a comparator, a prospective outcome is what earns the right to talk about the benefit at all. So why does this one get to say it helps? Because benefit is a causal claim, and causal claim needs a design that can isolate the effect of the tool, a comparator group, and outcomes measured going forward, not mined from the past. That is what Spirit AI and Consort AI govern. And when a paper claims benefit without that architecture, the missing framework is your critic. But let's stay appropriately critical even here. A waitlist control tells you the tool beats nothing, not that it beats existing care. And also, the waitlisted people can inflate the effect, apparent effect, through expectation. So the follow-up was short, and for a generative chatbot, the safety questions: could it give harmful advice? Does it recognize a crisis? Is there a human oversight? Are central, and that is exactly beside AI's territory. So good evidence and continued scrutiny are not opposites. Now, let me bring this back to the tools you will actually encounter, because the market is crowded and noisy and the names blur together. The size here roughly tracks how visible each tool is, and the color tracks its category. Please don't try to memorize any of them. The single point I want you to take from this wall of logos is that behind every one of them sits one of just three things: a treatment, a test, or a prediction. And the next slide sorts them out. So they are of patient facing therapy chatbots like Vyasa. It is positioned as a wellness, but none of them are FDA cleared as a treatment. So prescription digital therapeutics examples are there. These are having regulatory authorization, Then there are AI scribes which help in transcribing the data, recording the sessions, analyzing them. And then there is a tool for triage which is deployed in NHS, that is limbic access. Um, then there are voice biomarkers like Kintsugi on the diagnostic frontier, and then there are general chatbots like ChatGPT, Gemini, etc. So they don't have any clinical validation. So whichever one you meet, appraising it collapses back to the same question: is it a treatment, is it a test, or is it a prediction? And therefore, what evidence I should look for? Just to make that concrete, three interfaces you will actually see. A support chatbot feels warm and therapeutic, which is exactly why you must appreciate it as a treatment and ask for a randomized evidence. An AI scribe silently drafts your notes, convenient, but it's a measurement tool. So the questions are accuracy and crucially dangerous omissions like a missed risk statement, etc. And a risk dashboard hands you a confident looking number and a red flag, but it's a prediction. So the question are whether that 72% is calibrated and whether it was ever validated in patient like yours. The interface is designed to be seductive. The discipline is to look straight past it to the right question. Now, if you want to read some AI ML papers, I have given links for few papers across the categories. These are open access papers. These are not meta-analysis. These are real studies, original studies. So you can go through at your own leisure. So this suicide model is solid, but it is still single site. D study is refreshing because the model barely beat the clinicians, and Gallo brain imaging study is lovely example of a big honest data deflating the hype. And for our region, Raj Gopalan is our Indian example, an autism screening model with an Indian co-author. Pick one and run tonight 7 questions on it. We will see what questions you have to frame. The single most revealing question is: has this tool been validated in a population like mine? Like, has this tool been used in a patient care population, the kind which I treat? So, a model developed and calibrated in UK or US cohort can and usually will miscalibrate in an Indian population with different base rates, with different presentations, different help seeking behavior, different codes, different language. The ranking might hold, the overall relative ranking might hold, but the actual numbers will not hold. And here is the uncomfortable truth for us: genuine India cohort AI psychiatry studies are scarce. Most tools reaching Indian clinics, even Vyasa, which is India built, were validated largely on the Western or global users, not on Indian patients. So because it does so much work in one plain sentence, it bundles. So this question: has the tool been validated in population like mine? I like that question because it bundles everything together. How much is the baseline prevalence, whether calibration was done, whether external validation was done, and whether it is applicable for me or not. All the things are answered in the single question. And in a journal club or in a vendor meeting, you can ask, show me the validation in patients like mine. That's all. Now, let us summarize what we have to look. There are these 7 selected questions in that order to have an honest judgment about AI ML paper in around 10 minutes. The first one: what type of study is this and which reporting standard applies? Number two: does the claim match the design? Because remember, a ROC curve cannot prove benefit. Number three: could the data have leaked? Think of COVID and Frankenstein's dataset. Number four: is it validated externally and is it calibrated? Number five: do the metrics suit a rare outcome? Sensitivity, PPV shown as real counts. Number six: what is the label really measuring? Whether it is disorder or whether it is systems behavior. Number seven: who could this harm and is that reported? If a paper survives all of the 7 questions, It deserves your serious attention. If it fails three or more, the headline is probably hype. And this is approximate rubric. The link for presentation is shared and you can go at your own time on the 6 cases I have highlighted. So every AI trap, actually they are the old questions in the evidence and critical analysis. So when we say data leakage, it is just a circular analysis, that is testing your own derivation from the sample. Then discrimination versus calibration is like risk score that has to be calibrated. We know that prediction score has to be externally validated. Overfitting is why we have always demanded external validation. The accuracy trap is the rates, the PPV and Bayes theorem that is taught in every screening lecture. So algorithmic bias is confounding and measurement bias is outcome level. And any claim of benefit faces the same consort questions as any drug trial. So the punchline is this: the 7 question checklist isn't a new AI skill. It is a good epidemiology in new vocabulary. You already have the skills. The title tonight was a journey from hype to evidence, and bridge across it is one simple reflective habit. For any AI paper, ask yourself, what would actually convince me that acting on this helps a real patient? And then check whether the study delivers that or merely gestures at it. Your clinical judgment is not being made obsolete by AI. In fact, you are the final validation step, the person who notices when a model has learned the health system rather than the illness. So don't be dazzled by the terminology. Ask the same questions you have always asked, and the hype separates cleanly from the evidence. Thank you very much, and I will be glad to take your questions. There are certain appendix slides which you can browse later on, and they may be useful. So I will just leave it here. These are the resources, the checklist, readings, and videos. You can go through this. There is a Equator network which hosts all the reporting checklist. And for clear explanation of AUC, I would point to you the StatQuest video link, which you can see. And you can also see this Eric Topol's TED talk. And that is a real homework that explains whether AI can diagnose what physicians can't see. These are the full references and frameworks. And yes, one last slide. In the spirit of the whole talk, it would be little inconsistent to give a lecture about hype versus verified evidence and then not disclose how this talk itself was made. This deck and its notes were prepared with assistance of an AI system for literature search, drafting, figures, but I personally reviewed and verified every fact, statistic, and citation against primary and open access sources, and the judgments are my own. Being transparent about AI assistance is exactly the standard we are asking of the papers and a good habit for all of us to adopt. Thank you again, and let's take your question.
Thank you, Dr. Pathare, for being so genuine and having us, being very discreet with your session. Dr. Singh, I would also invite some comments before we take on the questions.
I think Dr. Yes. Dr. Vishwajit, you are there?
Thank you very much, sir, for this excellent presentation. Your lecture has provided us with a practical framework, I think, for critically evaluating AI and machine learning research rather than simply accepting these hype associated with this technology. I'm sure the audience has gained valuable knowledge into interpreting AI and literature more confidently and responsibly also. Now we are open for the questions and discussion, I think.
Yes, I can see some questions in the chat. We will
Yes.
take one by one. So the first one is, how can we get to predict suicide based on MHRB data that we have about suicide? Can this ML model be tested in a small setting such as a single institute studies or always large data? it can be done on whatever database you are having. So it and then externally validated in the other setting. So this is possible if you have a data and data are before event. So predictors have to be temporally before the outcome has happened. So that this is possible. The first two things are possible. Even with a small data set, it is possible, but with the pinch of salt, which we have discussed. So that has to be externally validated, and metric has to be sensitivity and PPV for predicting that. Then for speech AI research, using this, how can we mathematically prove our model is catching real symptoms instead of just memorizing data? So that is what we have explained in the presentation, that what you are labeling or what you are diagnosing and how you are doing your feature scaling, how you are splitting the data, whether it is being equally reliable or have equal parameters in external validation, that will tell us whether it is memorizing noise or whether it is actually doing the thing. Then besides standard pitch, jitter, shimmer, what other raw audio features are most reliable for early detection? Do we strictly need it to map to those physical markers to consider it as evidence? So this speech NLP and all, I am not very sure about it. There might be other features, but how to check if that is working or not, that I can tell. This I am not very sure about which other features would be there for detection. Any other question?
Sir, I just have a curiosity. Like, in your opinion, can AI ever replace clinical judgment, or should it always remain like a decision supporting tool?
It will remain decision supporting tool. It will only be helpful in some kind of patient engagement, but it cannot replace clinical judgment. Few things like we delegate things to the frontline workers. Those things can be taken up, but the core clinical judgment will remain with humans. And other thing, like with the chatbots, many of us might have tried having conversations with them, but after certain point of time, we lose interest in chatting with it. You might have realized that. So there is no way it will replace humans and clinical judgment.
Yeah, 100% agree with you, sir.
Yes.
So, are there any more questions? And maybe I would just like to add on to Dr. Vishijit's question as well, when he mentioned about clinical judgment and Dr. Pakhari seconded that we, as mentioned, we have rare outcomes, which are also very complex interplays within the outcomes itself. So that itself might make it difficult, Dr. Abhijit, to predict. What is your say on this? Because as you already mentioned in this, very few outcomes are direct and have few confounders within their system.
Yes, and particularly in psychiatry, diagnoses are abstract. We pick up between the lines. We have much of the context which is non-verbal. So it is quite tricky in psychiatry than in other branches.
Yes.
There is just a slight submission here, sir. In psychiatry, we are constantly, though we are not successful yet, trying to find the biomarkers for various disorder, and for example, behaviors as well. So the problem is consistency of the biomarker is something which is always there. So we cannot 100% of the time, not even 50% of the time, have any biomarker which will stand true. So it becomes difficult to make any judgment related to management or diagnosis or prognosis even just based on the biomarker. So do you think AI and machine learning at some point of time, probably if accumulates enough biomarkers, at that time we may be shifting more towards ML diagnosis and ML prognosis or ML treatment even, of course, to be ratified, to be verified and backed up by the clinical judgment as of now, because as you said, of course, is abstract. Depression is a diagnosis which is very abstract. To me, something that can be depression, to somebody else it can be something like schizoaffective disorders and things like that. If biomarkers happen to be successful at a later stage, do you think it should be more relevant in ML and AI in psychiatry for diagnosis and management?
Yes, that is why we have chosen this topic: how to test and how to be sure that what we are doing is right. So obviously, with more and more data sets being generated, now more and more personal data sets are being generated, but people are equally aware of, like, there is something called as ecological momentary analysis, which keeps track of your mobile behavior, screen behavior, and all, and from that they try to make judgment. Ultimately, patient-reported outcomes will thrive, and if patient-reported outcomes are getting better with AI assistance or AI diagnostics, then that will catch up. So ultimately, those patient-reported outcomes will matter.
Yeah. So another question I received in my personal chat, sir.
Yes, please.
Are there any specific journal clubs, etc., that run where students, researchers can participate and learn further about these things?
I am not sure, but in institutes, those the residents particularly, they can take up AI/ML papers in their journal club, and the thing is simple. That is what I have explained in the talk. The names are just changed. Concepts and phenomenon are same.
Yes. Dr. Gaurav, over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Pakhare, sir, for taking the questions really wholeheartedly. So, the evening has reminded us that AI in psychiatry is neither a magic wand or a threat to be feared. It is simply another tool that must be held to the same standard of scientific scrutiny as any other. So, as clinicians, our task going forward is to stay curious, stay critical, and let evidence, not enthusiasm, guide how we adopt technologies into our practice. So, on behalf of the research subcommittee, which includes our advisor, Dr. Nilesh Shah, the chairperson, Dr. Manik Pishe, a convener, Dr. Suyog Jaiswal, PC coordinator, Nimesh Parik sir, and members Vaishali, Sandeep, and myself, and the Psychiatric Society of Western Zonal Branch, I'd like to thank our speaker, our chairperson, and for all of you for making this evening such an engaging one. A special thanks to Dr. KK Mishra for being in the session throughout, Dr. Avijit Pai as well, and the entire research subcommittee for making this session possible. So with that, I formally bring this webinar to a close. So good night and thank you all for joining us. Dr. Suyog, Dr. everyone here.
Thank
So
you
good
very
evening.
much, Gaurav. Yes.
And you can
Thank you.
circulate the presentation website which I have shared, Dr. Suyo.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
It is in
I will
open
definitely.
source. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Yeah. Good night.